Located 80 miles east of Los Angeles is the Inland Empire region, which is composed of Riverside County and San Bernardino County. It is summed to approximately 4 million people and about 1 million undocumented people. The Inland Empire is a diverse working-class community known for its manufacturing sector and is also as a capital of warehousing and logistics in the world. Consequently, since 2019, the Inland Empire is also home to the worst air quality in the world, with over 7,000 warehouses throughout the Inland Empire. What most people might not know is that the Inland Empire is also home to more prisons, jails, and detention centers than LA County and Orange County combined, even though those counties have 9 million more people than the Inland Empire does. Historically speaking, the Inland Empire has been underfunded and under-resourced by the state and federal government. This and the abundance of cheap land has made the region more vulnerable to predatory companies like Amazon and Geo Group, which is the largest private prison company in the world. To tell the region's history and to talk about the story of environmental racism and incarceration in the region, we take you to the high desert of the Inland Empire. We start here at the now deactivated George Air Force Base. For nearly 50 years, the base was the main economic driver of the region. Now, 30 years after it's been deactivated, the surrounding communities continue to struggle with unemployment rate, which is double the United States average. The region continues to struggle with bringing high-paying jobs, and their constituents often have to travel down the hill into the inland area to San Bernardino and Riverside urban areas for work. Yet Amazon and Geo Group continue to rake in billions of dollars every year in profit, even though they have mainstays in the high desert area. So our story starts at the military base because it's the first domino to fall in a history and a story of economic exploitation and the detrimental health impacts it has in the community. Faraz Rizvi from the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice will tell us more about the proliferation of the logistics and warehousing industry in the Inland Empire, and of course its impacts it has on the health of the constituents of the IE. The inland region has been taken over by warehouses over the last decade. Since 2008, the Great Recession, local leaders have been turning to the logistics sector for development, claiming that they bring jobs. In that time alone, the inland region has seen 1 billion square feet of warehouse development, and the primary shaper of that is Amazon, whose fleets stand behind us. Because of this rate of development, warehouses are going up next to homes and schools, and high concentration that has increased truck traffic significantly. This has caused the worst air quality in the nation. The South Coast Air Basin of the Inland Empire is classified as severe non-attainment for ozone and particulate matter by the EPA and has led to high levels of toxic air pollutants that is killing our community. Particulate matter 2.5, also called PM 2.5, is a toxic substance emitted by diesel combustion engines, like in trucks and trains, and is so small that once breathed in, it can go through your lungs and directly into your bloodstream. This can cause health effects like asthma, COPD, respiratory and cardiovascular disease. It is actually killing people. This is related to the environmental justice aspects that led to a military base creating a Superfund site and a detention center that are being built here once the base closed. The same frontline communities that are cited within these toxic pollution burdens are the ones least in control of the land used around them. In the Inland Empire, residents have begun to stand up and say no more warehousing, but the calls are falling on deaf ears. The detention centers, which imprison immigrants seeking asylum, the military base, which furthers imperialism and militarism across the global south, the logistics sector, which exploits and pollutes black and brown neighborhoods, are connected to the same extractive systems of capitalism that create profit from the suffering of our communities. These struggles are intimately bounded together, and through intersectional organizing, we can fight to end these systems and create regenerative, health, and resilient communities that prioritize our public health. Thank you. Everyone in the Inland Empire is affected by the same legacy of contradiction that forces us to choose between economic exploitation and our health. The origin of the pollutants may be different and the adverse effects might be coming from a different location, But for regular citizens, for military servicemen and their families, these detrimental health complications from these pollutants are very much real. And to tell us more about the intersection of environmental justice and incarceration, we have Olivia Rosenberg Chavez, a Pittsburgh College student and an intern with the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice.
Here we are across from the Victorville Correctional Facility, one of 3 facilities all housed in the same geographical location. This specific land is former military housing, which as you can see is now just unused land next to the prison. We chose this site because we wanted to highlight the impact that the George Air Force Superfund site has had on this facility. Originally, we wanted to be on the prison site, but during our scouting trip, we were prohibited from staying on the site and told we couldn't physically be on the land. That experience really highlighted for us the importance of pushing back against the intentional inaccessibility of these prisons and the government's insistence on keeping incarcerated populations isolated from the rest of the community. Built atop a weapons storage area near the George Air Force Base, the Victorville Correctional Facility reflects a nationwide pattern of environmental consequences caused by toxic military sites. A report by The Sun found that lurking in the water supply and soil beneath the former base are 33 hazardous chemicals, including plumes of spent jet fuel and trichloroethylene, an industrial solvent used to degrease planes. Impacts of these chemicals on the body can have numerous negative health impacts, including damage to the nervous system, kidneys, heart, and other organs, and has been found to cause cancer in mice and rats. PFAS, a chemical used in firefighting foam, was also found at over 5,000 ppt in one of the wells at the base. The EPA does not regulate this chemical, but a safe limit is considered 70 ppt. Prolonged exposure to PFAS can have detrimental health impacts, including low birth weight, increased risk of some cancers, negative reproductive effects, and weakened immune system responses, among others. The same report found that in 1996, after the closure of the base, the EPA began to work to clean up the site, classifying the base as a Superfund site. With support from the Water Board, the EPA pushed back against the Air Force's original plan to let Mother Nature clean the water over time, a process that could take over 500 years before restoring conditions to normal. A Superfund site is a location contaminated by hazardous waste that has been designated by the EPA for management and cleanup. Of the roughly 1,200 Superfund sites in the U.S., approximately 900 of them are abandoned military facilities or sites that support military needs. Additionally, at least 589 federal and state prisons are located within 3 miles of a Superfund cleanup site, and of those, 134 are located within only 1 mile of the Superfund site. Research done by the Urban Institute's Housing Matter initiative found that adverse health effects are most likely to occur within a 1.8-mile boundary around a Superfund site. Where we're standing right now is 1.6 miles away from the heart of the Air Force Base. This site, while dangerous and toxic, is not out of the norm and is part of a larger state narrative of disposability that subjects our most vulnerable populations to the brunt of environmental hazards. In addition to the adverse health impacts from within the prison itself, there's an overarching connection between the hazardous conditions themselves and the viewpoints that allow certain populations to be exposed to these conditions. An interview from the National Resources Defense Council argues that the government's rationale when building prisons is to find spaces that don't otherwise have a use and hope the outcry is minimal. The strategy is very often touted as a way for the communities to bring in federal dollars. In short, economic incentives have dominated prison expansion, using a framework of disposability to subject incarcerated populations to toxic prison sites that the government has made unsafe and thus inhospitable. Because our society at large ignores our enormous prison population, they're made even more vulnerable to environmental abuses within. At its core, this tour is about highlighting the intersectionalities between the movement for environmental justice and the fight against toxic prisons. We're fighting for a safe, healthy community with clean drinking water, healthy food, clean air, and access to a healthy environment. To do so, we must make sure that we are advocating for those most impacted by environmental injustices and centering them in our movements. Incarcerated populations have been historically overlooked and excluded by environmental movements. We're placing an enormous burden on incarcerated populations to fight these battles, when fundamentally we shouldn't subject anyone to these toxic environments and should be actively fighting against these harmful sites of environmental injustice. Being here today is one step in the right direction towards recognizing incarcerated populations as frontline communities in the face of environmental injustice.
For over 50 years, the George Air Force Base knowingly used toxic chemicals and radioactive material in and around the base. Not to be outdone by the Air Force, the GEO Group Corporation has their own history of poisoning their inmates and detainees. To tell us more about this history and the impact of detention centers is Lisbeth Ablin, organizer with the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice.
After the base closed, Adelanto became a prison town by contracting with the state of California to open Adelanto State Prison. This was a pattern throughout the country during this time. From 1980 to 1991, there were 213 prisons built in non-metro areas in the US. In 2010, the city of Adelanto was in desperate need of a new start to their economy after the financial crisis, and officials decided to sell the city-owned prison to the corporation GEO Group. One thing I've learned from studying prison companies like GEO Group is that these companies understand that leveraging cities' economic anxieties against them is a profitable business plan. The hyper-criminalization of migrants and people of color has resulted in this huge mass incarceration system that destabilizes entire communities. The prison has failed to bring the economic opportunity it promised. Currently, the city's poverty rate is 28.5, double California's average. This detention center has a long list of human rights abuses, including inadequate health care, sexual assault, use of solitary confinement, and mistreatment. Between 2010 and 2016, the facility was in the top 5 facilities with the most complaints to ICE's reporting line for sexual and physical abuse. 7 immigrants have died at the facility since it opened. In 2017, 3 people died within months, including Osmar Epifanio Gonzalez Gabda, Sergio Alfonso Lopez, and Vicente Cáceres Madariaga. There have been at least 7 attempted suicides at the facility, which underscores the severity of the conditions. The Shutdown Adelanto Coalition launched a press campaign to expose the abuse that was happening. Our advocacy led to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency confirming this environmental violation after an investigation. A federal judge ordered facility staff to stop using that toxic chemical. If you'd like to hear more first-hand testimony, you can watch Adelanto Toxic Tour Part 1. Shortly after this campaign, we received reports from inside about the contaminated water folks had to consume. Some immigrants had been infected with H. pylori, a water disease. The water contamination at Adelanto is not a new issue, and we continue to receive complaints from inside of the facility. Extensive research has shown that carceral facilities like Adelanto Ice Processing Center underscore serious environmental deficiencies and injustices, particularly on the problem of water contamination.
A local resident and local organizer, Estela and Leonor, cap off our speakers and the tour. Leonor has been organizing in Adelanto for 4 years, working with the local Spanish-speaking community on the issues of their local water quality. The same water that is sourced from the wells adjacent to the George Air Force Base within the radius of the Superfund site. Estela and Leonor are part of a grassroots group called Unidos por un Mejor Adelanto, United for a Better Adelanto. This is a group that is dedicated and is very concerned with what's going on in Adelanto. Their fight for clean water and justice can be traced back to 1941, the same year that the George Air Force Base was built.
¿Les puede hablar sobre las experiencias que ha conocido de sus amigas aquí en Adelanto sobre su calidad de agua?
Bueno, nosotros somos una organización que está trayendo un programa de abogacía ante el ayuntamiento para mejorar el agua de Adelanto. ¿Cómo sabemos que es el agua de Adelanto la que está mala y que es el mayor problema que tienen los residentes? Porque en alguna oportunidad nosotros nos reunimos con residentes y empezamos poco a poco a irlos empoderando a ellos, a irlos capacitando, a irlos enseñando a cómo abogar, a cómo peticionar ante el ayuntamiento por las necesidades que tienen sus comunidades. La comunidad empezó a enfocarse en un problema que era el agua. Todos decían el agua en Adelanto es un problema, el agua en Adelanto es un problema, el agua en Adelanto es un problema. Empezamos a trabajar con los líderes de la comunidad y empezamos a ser aliados como con la Universidad de Loma Linda, con la Universidad de Pittsburgh, aún con el ayuntamiento también, con Chan, con San Mary's, con San Joseph, con muchas organizaciones estamos trabajando, incluso también con la High School de Adelanto estamos haciendo partners para tratar de unirnos para peticionar por el agua. Hemos hecho un estudio, gracias a Dios, a la Universidad de Pittsburgh Hemos hecho un estudio del agua y los resultados que arrojó ese estudio del agua es que el agua de Adelanto está en muy mala calidad, que de pronto el reporte que nos están dando a nosotros, la ciudad no es el mismo que ellos lograron obtener. Luego nosotros vamos a seguir trabajando, vamos a seguir luchando porque Adelanto sea un Adelanto mejor.
¿Qué le gustaría ver para mejorar el agua en Adelanto?
Oh, por supuesto que lo primero, o sea, así, relámpago, necesitamos que ojalá hubiese una póliza donde todos los residentes de Adelanto pudieran tener un filtro de agua en sus casas para que mientras se cambian las pipas subterráneas, que es un proyecto mucho más grande, por lo menos ellos estén guardando su salud en este tiempo. Y ya lo segundo sería que lograran cambiar las pipas de Adelanto. Sabemos que es un proyecto que cuesta como 50 millones de dólares, pero vamos a abogar a donde sea y con quien sea para lograr obtener ese dinero y lograr empezar a darle a Adelanto esa solución para el agua de ellos.
Thus ends Toxic Tour Part 2. Thank you for watching, and keep an eye out for the third iteration of the Toxic Tour series coming soon. Thank you.